Life can seem pretty hectic today. We have a lot to do. A lot of times I think even though we don't have anything to do, our minds keep racing. Keep thinking about different things, worrying about what we need to do, what we didn't do. We have a lot of stress today. Now, stress is defined as a state of mental or emotional strain or tension. Mental or emotional strain or tension. The stress is just not a mental thing, it's a physical thing. When we're under stress, our bodies undergo certain chemical changes that can actually be measured. As a response to stress, our body goes into a heightened state of awareness. That's what's called the fight or flight response. Our bodies prepare for action. Certain chemicals are secreted into our bodies. Our blood flow changes. It goes more towards the muscles. Our heart rate increases. Our brain activity decreases. Our body prepares to give us a burst of energy that we would need to either fight or run away. And so stress is a good thing. But excessive stress can cause many things. Heart disease, high blood pressure, stroke, diabetes, heartburn, stomach problems, constipation. According to the MD Anderson Cancer Center at the University of Texas, stress can increase your risk for cancer. Stress can cause wear and tear on the body. But under the appropriate circumstances, stress is good. It allows us to deal with situations we face in life. And we all know life is not a bed of roses. We face situations in life where we need extra energy, where we may not be able to get but 2 or 3 hours sleep a night. Things happen. And we need to have that extra store of energy to be able to cope with those things. The problem, though, comes when stress is not an occasional thing in the appropriate circumstance, but it's something we deal with for extended periods of time. When that happens, we lack mental idleness. Now, we see instances of mental idleness connected with Jesus a number of times in the Gospels. We heard one today, where it said that the multitudes thronged and thronged around Jesus. And he would get exhausted, so he would go out to a deserted place by himself. In Matthew chapter 14, it says, Jesus sent the multitudes away, and he went up to the mountain apart alone to pray. When the evening came, he was alone. The Gospel of Mark said in the morning, he rose up a great while before daylight and went out and departed into a solitary place. Luke chapter 5 says, he withdrew into the wilderness. And probably the best known example is right before Jesus was arrested by the Jews, where he went to the Garden of Gethsemane and told the disciples to wait down here, where he went on up alone. And we see this many times in the Gospels. And it's not only associated with prayer time. For example, in Mark chapter 6, the disciples were exhausted, and it says, Jesus said to them, come aside by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while. So he realized they were exhausted and needed some downtime. And this is something that Jesus himself set the example for, but it's something that most of us don't do. We know the importance of physical rest, but often we don't know the importance of mental rest. You know, the body can't live without sleep. Certain things happen in our brain during sleep that if they didn't happen, you wouldn't live. So downtime, though, is not like sleep. It can be called waking rest. And it turns out that downtime is necessary for our physical and our mental well-being. A number of years ago, I was talking to a neurologist. That's a doctor that specializes in the brain and nervous system. And he told me that all of our actions, everything we do, both consciously and unconsciously, and all of our bodily processes can be explained by only 30% of our brain. In other words, he told me that we have no idea what the other 70% of our brain even does. So 70% of the brain is a mystery, what it does. Our brain is a mystery yet today. That's why doctors can't really do anything about stuff like Alzheimer's. They can see cancer, they can see clogged arteries, that's pretty straightforward. But they can't see the workings of the brain. That field is in its infancy. But recent advances in brain imaging technology has given us a little peek into some of the processes in the brain. Now, up until recently, it was previously assumed that when we take downtime, in other words, just sit around doing nothing, then our brain was basically at rest, except it keeps our heart beating and stuff like that going on. But recent advances in brain imagery have allowed researchers to determine that that's not true. That the time when we sit around and do nothing is a time when the brain shifts gears and becomes active in ways that were previously unknown. And when you talk about downtime, you talk about time when our brain is not focused on something from outside. It's not overloaded with stimuli coming in from outside. We're not doing anything. We're just relaxing and letting our minds wander. And when we do that, our brain is not reacting to an external stimulus. It's not reacting, for instance, to the sound of a siren going down the road. Our brain goes into what's called the default mode. And there is unique activity in the brain during that default mode that is not there at any other time. In the words of a study done at Harvard University, when we take downtime, we muse about past happenings, we envision possible future events, we lapse into ideations about worlds that are far from our immediate surroundings. These are the mental processes that make up fantasy, imagination, daydreams, and thought. That study called it private mental experience. It's not you interacting with the world. It's you interacting inside your own brain. These thoughts are not the result of some kind of external stimulus. They are originating totally in your own brain. Your brain develops this on its own. And researchers believe that that is actually the mode your brain wants to be in. Because when you're not doing anything else, that's the mode it goes into. It's the default mode. It's the way our brain wants to work. Now see, in modern life, we are overloaded with various kinds of external stimuli. Our brains are overloaded with different stuff all the time. And they wear out. They just wear out. They get tired. You can see this. If you're working on something that requires a lot of concentration and attention, after a while you just get to where you say, well, I just can't think anymore. I can't pay attention anymore. Even if you want to keep on, your brain rebels and you find yourself, your mind wandering off. I just can't concentrate any longer, you know. That's the brain trying to enter default mode. It does that because it needs to, because that's essential. If we refuse to let it do that, we become worn out. But it's not just attention span. It appears to be important for memory, for understanding, to imprint new things you've learned, for creativity and problem solving. But most importantly, for our purposes, this default mode activity appears to be essential in developing a sense of ethical behavior. And ethical behavior just refers to whether you do right or wrong things. And it appears that that default mode activity in our brain is essential for developing a sense of ethics in people. A sense where we want to do the right thing. And so the default mode of your brain influences whether you will live your life doing good things or whether you will live your life doing bad things. And so this idea of downtime, of doing nothing, is important from a Christian perspective if we want to live the way Jesus wants us to live. Not only does downtime have benefits for our mental and physical health, it also has benefits for our moral and ethical lives. It is essential if you want to live your life doing good things instead of bad things. True downtime requires replacing the overload of stimuli coming from us from all places with just nothing and letting it all come from inside. We saw from the Gospels how Jesus did this by going out to a lonely place. He took the disciples to a lonely place. Interestingly, when the Gospels talk about this, it's always out in nature somewhere. It's never really said that Jesus took the disciples into a room and they all shut up in there for a week. When they did this, they went out somewhere into nature. And I believe that's significant. I believe nature does have the ability to heal. And there's a man named Mark Berman. He's a researcher in the field of ecopsychology. That's the field that studies how our environment affects us. And he says that the hustle and bustle of a city wears us out, but that the environments of nature restore us. He did a study where he assigned two groups of people some difficult memory tasks. And then they worked on this for like 2 hours. And then one group of people got to go out and walk the streets of New York City for an hour. The other group of people went out into nature for an hour and walked around. He brought them back in. The ones who had been walking the streets of New York City for an hour did very poorly on the memory test. The ones who had been out in nature for an hour did much better. So you see, the key to all this about downtime appears to require a change from an environment where our minds are overstimulated to an environment where our minds can wander on their own. And with the overstimulation removed, that's what will happen. Our minds will enter the default mode. Being in nature is a good way to do that. That's what Jesus did. A lot of people don't live where they can do that. We do. A lot of people are not as fortunate to do that. I'll tell you 2 ways that I like to do that in my life. I like to go in Catholic churches in small towns in Germany. I don't necessarily go to services there, I just like to go in there. Back years ago, the crime problem in Europe was not significant. And those churches were just left open during the week, during the day. Just go in and sit there for as long as you want to. And I'd love to do that. I just go in and just sit there. Just sit there and be quiet. It was just, I just love to do that. Can't do that on a regular basis when you live around here, though. But the other way I have found is listening to music. I don't mean music like you hear on the radio. I'm talking about quiet, meditative music. Now, when I was the organist over at Redeemer, and they built a new church over there and brought that new organ, it had a feature on it. It had what was called a sequencer. And a sequencer was just a computer that hooked up to the organ. And you could turn that thing on and it would record your keystrokes. It didn't record the music. It recorded the keystrokes on the organ. And then you could turn that thing and play it back just like you played it. Actually play the organ. And so when I'd be over there practicing, when I got it to where I thought it was halfway decent, I'd turn on the sequencer and record it. You know, the church is huge, and I'd go way out there and sit there and listen to it. Now, it wasn't that I was just enamored with listening to myself play the organ. It was that I just wanted to sit there in the quiet of that huge church with that calm, meditative music. I really liked that. I really liked it. So that experience, though, is why we have quiet music before the service in this church. Now, I think some musicians in centuries past knew about what scientists have recently discovered about the default note. Because in old German organ music, there is an idea that's called heartbeat, and that refers to tempo, or the speed that is played. And the idea was that music should be played to harmonize with the rhythm of your body. It should not be played faster than the rhythm of your body. It should be to where you just feel it flowing with the rhythm of your body. The music itself calms you if you're upset. If the music is in the rhythm of your body, the music brings your body back. The opposite is also. I warned Wanda about this last night so she wouldn't be caught off guard. But years ago, Wanda, it was this Celtic music show coming to the Common Auditorium up in Morgan. I may have told this story before. Wanda wanted to go, so we went up there one night. I do not like Celtic music. Okay, it was 2 solid hours of loud music as fast as you can imagine, and people dancing around on stage up there like they were just woo. And we sat there for 2 hours, and then we got in the car. I said, I feel like I'm a jerk, in a jerk all over. I need a bag. You know, and so that's the way music can affect you. I do not like stuff like that. So the point of this is that in our lives, we are constantly bombarded with stimuli from outside, and our minds get overstimulated and wore out. At some point, we need to remove ourselves from that and actually do nothing. And that's okay. We actually see that example from Jesus. It's okay to just sit there and do nothing. In fact, our bodies need that. We'd all be better off if we did. And remember, one of the benefits of it is that it helps our lives become oriented toward more ethical behavior. Now, there's no one way that you have to do that. Maybe you just sit there and don't do anything. A lot of people go to the beach and they go to all these tourist attractions and all these expensive restaurants and all these stores that charge 5 times what something's worth. We do not do that when we go to there. I don't go to tourist attractions. We go to sit out on the beach. And people say, well, why do you sit out there? Because we go out there in the morning and sit there. Sometimes we'll take our lunch out there with us. Sometimes we'll go back to the room and eat. And I just watch the water. We just sit there and do nothing. That's default mode. That's down. So it could be any way you want to do it. But it is something that has health benefits, emotional benefits, moral benefits, and it is something that we see Jesus doing. And so we have an example from Jesus himself. So I hope you will be able to just do nothing and not feel guilty about it.